Maya and her friends were sprawled out on the living room floor, each of them lost in their phones. The room was alive, with a faint hum of notifications and the occasional burst of laughter from a funny video or that rhythmic tapping of fingers on glass. This was their usual Friday night routine, hanging out, but not really talking. They didn't need to talk, they were perfectly comfortable in their own little digital worlds. Maya was halfway through a video when she felt it, that faint, prickly sensation that you get when you feel like someone's watching you. She glanced up from her phone, but everything seemed fine. Claire was on the couch, scrolling and chewing on her nails, and Jess was sitting there cross legged on the carpet, giggling about something on her screen. So Maya just shrugged it off and went back to her phone. A few minutes later, the feeling returned. It was stronger this time, like an itch in her brain. She could feel it and she couldn't scratch it. So she shifted, uncomfortably, clearly, and without thinking, she let her eyes wander toward the corner of the room. That's when she saw it. Out of the corner of her eye, something faint and indistinct hovering near the edge of the light. It wasn't quite a shadow, but it wasn't fully formed either, like a blurry smudge that her brain couldn't quite make sense of. It seemed to flicker almost like static, and though she couldn't see it, it seemed like it had a face. She could swear it was looking at them. Her heart skipped and she sat straight up and tried to squint her eyes to get a better look, but the moment she focused her eyes on the spot, it faded, leaving nothing behind except an empty corner and a shadow. What's up? Jess asked, glancing up from her phone. Maya hesitated, not wanting to sound like she was crazy. Nothing, she mumbled as she forced an uncomfortable laugh. I thought I saw something. Claire didn't even look up. Probably just the light, your brain messing with you. Maya nodded and tried to laugh it off, but that uneasy feeling, it lingered. A few minutes later, it happened again. This time, it was closer, hovering behind Jess. It was faint and translucent, kind of like the heat waves you see rising off of hot asphalt. Maya breathed as she caught it on her sight. She noticed the way it seemed to move. It was like it was there, but it wasn't. And it wasn't just there, it was doing something as it leaned over Jess, its formless body rippling slightly. It almost looked as though it was pulling something from her. Maya's phone slipped from her hand as she spoke. Jess, did you see that? Jess looked up, startled from the phone falling. See what? There was something there. Maya pointed, her finger trembling slightly. But as soon as Jess turned to look, the figure was gone. There's nothing there. Jess frowned. Are you okay? Claire asked, finally putting her phone down. Maya nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the spot where the thing had been. I swear, I saw something, guys. Her friends exchanged glances at each other. Maybe you're just tired, Claire offered. Yeah, or maybe you've been on your phone too long, Jess teased and laughed nervously. Maya didn't answer. She picked up her phone and she pretended to scroll again, but her mind was racing. She tried to focus on the screen, but her eyes kept darting to the corner and around the room. Where it had gone? As she sat there, she'd look up from her phone and then down to her phone, but her eyes kept darting to the edges of her vision. And then it appeared again, faint and blurry, this time near the door. It's like it stayed just on the edge of her sight, never fully formed, never allowing her to focus on it. She could see it. Her chest tightened as she watched the ripples shift and move. Do you guys seriously not see this? Her voice sharpened. See what? Jess asked, startled and uneased. It's like a shadow. But not really. Maya trailed off, realizing how crazy she sounded. It's right there. It's right behind you. Look, Jess. Jess froze in place. Her skin went pale. You're freaking me out, Maya. Stop. I'm not trying to, Maya said as her voice raised. It's. She whips her head towards the figure, determined to catch it before it disappeared, but once again it faded the moment before she could focus on it. Maya's breathing went shallow. Now her friends were staring at her, clearly concerned. It was palpable something was wrong. You're scaring me, Jess said softly. I'm scaring myself, Maya muttered. The room felt colder. Somehow Maya's hands shook as she picked up her phone again. Her friends were still staring at her, waiting for her to explain herself, but she couldn't find the words. All she knew was that the thing, whatever it wasn't gone. It was still there, just out of sight, watching. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that the thing was there. Her friends had gone back to their phones, but she couldn't focus anymore. Every time she would glance up, her eyes would dart to the edge of the room, searching for the faint blur. She sat there in silence. The room was quiet, and then the unease of silence was broken by a loud vibration from Claire's phone. It buzzed and skidded a few inches away, kind of across the couch cushion. She laughed nervously. Geez, that scared me. Maya flinched, startled by the sudden sound. She glanced at Claire's phone. Her stomach knotted. Something about it felt wrong. And then the screen, it flickered, faintly at first, but then static like an old TV. Claire didn't seem to notice. Claire? Your phone, Maya said with some hesitation. Claire frowned and looked down. Huh? That's weird. She tapped on the screen, but the flickering didn't stop. It's probably just some kind of glitch. Does that happen often? Maya asked, clearly unsure or uncertain. No, Claire said slowly, finally setting her phone aside. But whatever, it's fine. Maya felt her skin crawl. She glanced at Jess, whose phone now seemed to dim. It's dimmer than it had been before. The screen wasn't glitching like Claire's, but the glow, it was eerie, muted, and the quality of it, it was like it was draining the power. And then she saw it again, the figure. It was back, hovering closer than ever. It stood just behind Jess. The shape was a bit clearer now, but still not fully formed. Maya couldn't make out the vague features, like some kind of hunched over predator, some kind of creature. Maya breathed. Jess, get away from your phone now. Jess blinked, startled. What? Why? Just do it. Maya's voice was clear and stern. Jess hesitated, but put her phone down. The moment she did, the figure seemed to recoil slightly, like it'd been burned or stung, but it didn't vanish completely. Instead, it turned its attention to Maya, and she felt the gaze like a weight pressing down on her chest. The air in the room grew colder, and her breath became a shallow gasp. The figure began to move towards her, slowly, more deliberate. Do you guys seriously not see this? Maya whispered under her voice. A slight tremble was closer now. It was leaning over her like it had leaned over Jess. She could feel it. Numbing sensation spread through her body. It wasn't just watching her, it was draining something from her. Without thinking, Maya grabbed her phone and threw it across the room. It hit the wall with a loud crack and fell to the floor. The figure recoiled violently. Its shape flickered like a dying flame or like a battery going out. What the hell, Maya? Claire shouted, jumping to her feet. I'm not crazy, Maya shouted back. It's the phones. It's using them. It's using them to take something from us. That's insane, Jess said, but her voice wavered. Just try it, Maya pleaded. Turn them off, please. Claire hesitated, and then sighed and powered down her phone. Jess followed suit, her hands slightly shaken from the whole incident. And for a moment, nothing happened. The room was silent, except for their breathing. And then the lights flickered. Maya's heart sank as the figure reappeared, this time darker, more defined. It seemed like it didn't need the phones. It seemed like it had grew stronger. It's still here, Maya whispered. You could barely hear her voice, but you could feel it. The figure began to move, its shape rippling in an unnatural wave as it approached. Maya stumbled back, grabbing Jess and Claire's arm. We have to go, she said, her voice trembling. Go where? Claire asked, her voice raising in panic. Anywhere but here. The three of them bolted for the front door, but as they reached it, the lights went out completely. The room was plunged in darkness and the air grew heavy and suffocating. Maya fumbled for the doorknob, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip it, and finally she yanked the door open and the three of them spilled out into the hallway. The moment they stepped outside, that oppressive feeling lifted. The cold numbness that had gripped Maya's body began to fade. What? What was that? Jess asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya shook her head. I don't know, but I think it's not just my house. I think it's the phones. Claire stared at her, horrified. You think it's like a virus or something? Maya looked down at her empty hands, a chill running down her spine. No, she said softly. It's not a virus. It's it's something else. It felt alive. Jess pulled her knees to her chest, her voice shaking. What if it comes back? Maya didn't answer. She didn't have an answer. She didn't even know what the thing was. She didn't know what was going on, but she knew it was waiting and it was watching. And it seemed like as long as they stayed connected to their screens, they wouldn't be safe. The three of them stayed at the park for hours, huddled together, on the bench trying to figure out what was going on, all the way until sunrise. The warmth of the daylight brought a sense of safety. Even this feeling was fleeting. The terror of the night felt distant, like a bad dream. Claire finally stretched out and let out a nervous laugh. Okay, maybe we just needed some sleep. That was probably nothing, right? Maya shot her a look. You're kidding me, right? That thing was real, Claire. You felt it. You saw it. Claire shrugged, trying to mask her unease. I mean, sure, I felt something, but I didn't see anything. So nothing really happened. Maybe it's like gone? Jess stood up off the ground, brushing herself off. Either way, we can't just sit here all day. I need a coffee. Let's go to the mall or something. There's people around. It'll be safer. I don't know. Maybe it'll make us feel normal again. Maya hesitated for a moment and then nodded. Fine, but can we do no phones? Let's just leave them off. Claire rolled her eyes, but complied. Making sure that her phone power was off, she slid it into her bag. The three of them walked to a nearby shopping plaza. The street seemed to gradually fill with that early morning buzz of people starting their day. When they reached the mall, everyone seemed normal. Strollers going about the stores, kids begging their parents for toys, workers handing out samples of food in the food court, that ordinary things that you would see at the mall. Maya, Claire, they felt like it was okay. Maybe it was just some shared hallucination or something. But then she saw it again. At first, on a young man sitting at a bench near the fountains. He had his headphones on. He was clearly scrolling absent-mindedly. And there it was, hovering, just behind him, that same faint shadow, the ripples, the figure she had seen from the night before. Bent over, almost crouched over him, wisp of something going towards his head, and the man didn't seem to react. Maya froze, her stomach churned, as her eyes darted around the plaza. It wasn't just one, they were everywhere. Every single person with a phone had one of them, those figures, clinging to them, draining them. They weren't faint, they were just dark shadows. It was definitely something. Maya? Jess asked, her voice shaking. What's wrong? Maya pointed, her hand trembling. They're here. Look around. They're everywhere. Claire squinted her eyes in confusion. I don't see anything. Maya's breath quickened as the panic set in. How can you not see them? They're right there. She grabbed Jess by the arm and pointed at a woman sitting on a bench. Her face was bathed in the pale glow of her phone, and the figure behind her seemed to writhe, its shape pulsating as if it was feeding on her. Don't you see it? Maya said desperately. Jess shook her head, her expression filled with worry. Maya, there's nothing there. No, Maya muttered, backing away from the crowd. No, 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 they're everywhere. They're feeding off of everyone. Can't you see it? Can't you feel it? Maya stumbled towards the exit. Her chest tightened as she tried to escape the suffocating weight of these unseen figures. She turned back to her friends, her voice breaking. We have to leave. We have to warn somebody. Claire and Jess exchanged an uneasy glance. Maya, you're scaring us, Jess said softly. Maya opened her mouth to respond, but then froze. Jess pulled out her phone, holding it in her hand. It was almost absent mindedly, and behind her a figure began to take shape. It was slow, deliberate, horrifyingly familiar. Jess, don't! Maya went. Jess frowned, confused. What? I'm not even doing anything. The shadow was on her now, its figure wrapping around her shoulders. Jess didn't flinch. She didn't even feel it. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she watched the figure lean in, passed right through her face, hovering over Jess's head. It was too late, and Maya realized something even worse. The figures, they seemed to be draining people, and they seemed to be spreading and growing stronger. And it was like no one else could see them. She stumbled backwards out of the mall, the sound of the bustling crowd faded in a dull roar. She wanted to scream, she wanted to warn everyone, but her voice, it got caught in her throat. And as she reached the edge of the parking lot, she stopped and turned, her head and heart pounding. The plaza was alive with people, but to her, it looked like a feeding ground. Everywhere she looked, they were there, and they were watching her.